once it's there, once the system's there, they can
It's
get
basically
death.
you have life and death before you, but choose life.
Right, he comes and says that thing will kill you.
Yeah.
Just like
Two
he came and
choices.
said the tree.
Yeah.
This tree will kill you.
Yeah.
Right?
choose
That's
life.
setting before them. It's not that he goes and makes the death,
Right.
and then he comes and brings the death to us and says, well, I'll test you
Yeah.
and see if you'll choose me or this death. That's not it.
Right.
And I mean, we talked about, I think my favorite part of it, I mean, I don't know, the whole message was good. There's so many subtle things in the message that help you discern the voice of the accuser or the voice of the stranger from the voice of the Father.
Right.
Because the serpent doesn't just want to accuse us, he wants us to think that it's God.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's not just happy
Yeah.
accusing us, he wants us to believe it's God. That's why Paul said Satan roams around like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. Well, who's the lion of the tribe of Judah? Jesus. He says his angels masquerade as angels of light.
Right.
Yes.
His messengers, Satan's messengers, actually masquerade or give themselves off as if they're messengers of light. Listen, if we knew it was the horn guy with the long tail and a pitchfork accusing us, we wouldn't care so much.
That's right.
Right? But he comes and gets us to be thinking that it's God.
Yeah.
That voice, that accusatory voice is God. That's what John's talking about in 1 John, I think it's chapter 5, when he gets to the point where the whole time he's been talking about God comes to purge our heart or to replace the fear in our heart with love. He comes to perfect love in our hearts by casting out the fear we felt in his presence from our hearts condemning us and replacing that fear with fear. So that when we see God, we see he only speaks well of me, he only loves me, he only wants to embrace me. When his face lights up with light, it's in adoration, not in anger. And then we feel love instead of fear. Well, John says, beloved, if your hearts condemn you, God is greater than your heart. And then you're going to believe God also condemns you. Right?
Yes.
Because all things are laid bare before God. So if your heart's busy filled with condemnation, you're going to believe God's also condemning you. Right? Because God's greater than your heart. You can't hide it.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the serpent got us thinking God was the one accusing us. That's the trick there.
You bet.
Like a lion roaming around seeking whom he may devour. And we've preached everything from the foundation that would actually back that up. You know, the goal, if you want to say it that way, my goal was to preach that whole message, which is all about justification, without saying the word justification one time. Because justification has been taught so much as a doctrine instead of the picture being painted.
Yes.
That I wanted to just talk about the picture
Yeah.
of justification.
Right.
Instead of, because when we get into all the doctrinal things, people become confused. And they see it all these different ways. But we preach justification from the perspective as if God was the accuser. We say we needed to be justified from our sin to God.
Yeah.
As if God was disappointed in us, as if God was against us. He stood opposed to us because of our sin. And now, by the blood of Jesus, we're going to be justified to him. Instead of seeing God was our advocate, the accuser was the one condemning us by our body of death. Death was condemning us. Death was accusing us, telling us we're not the children of God. And God comes, and by the blood of Jesus, he justifies us. So we're not justified to God, we're justified by God.
Yes.
He comes as the one that justifies us. Justification, in its simplest terms, is for God to come and prove that what he said about man in the garden when he got down on one knee was true. That's what he came to prove.
Whoa.
That's it, in a
Wow.
nutshell. Now, you can get all up in there with the details,
Right.
but he came to prove that what he said about man was true when he got down on one knee and baraked Adam, which means man.
Right.
So the serpent said, they're not
Right.
the children of God. They're not your children. Look at them. Right? And so God come and prove what he said was true. And it's like I love pointing to Abraham there. We can learn so much about the gospel and how God would preach the gospel if we looked at Abraham.
Yeah.
Right? But when it says God tested Abraham on the mountain, that's not what it says. God proved Abraham on the mount. James describes that Abraham was justified on the mount. Do you know what justify means in the Greek? To show something to be what it is. So, God called Abraham the father of many nations.
Right.
On the mount, God proved what he said about Abraham was true because Abraham appeared on the mount as the father of many nations. When did he appear on the mount? When Abraham said, even should Isaac die, God can raise from the dead.
Yes.
That's the faith.
Yes. Yes.
And so God showed the faith that was in Abraham's heart. And so Abraham appeared on the mount as the father of many nations. God proved him. He proved what he said about Abraham was true. He justified him.
Yes.
And that's what God come and did to mankind. He come and said, mankind are my children. Right? And he proved what he said was true in the resurrection of Jesus.
Yes.
That's justified. Right? Now, to all those who believe, they will find the Spirit of the Son dwelling in their heart, justifying them on the last day. Right? When they're revealed. Just like Jesus was revealed in the resurrection, where it says Jesus was revealed to be the Son of God with glory in the reresurrection.
Yes.
God proved what he said about Jesus was true. When Jesus came out of the Jordan River, what did God say? You are my beloved Son,
Right.
in whom I'm well pleased.
Right.
God proved what he said was true in the resurrection. Didn't look like he was the Son on the cross, did it?
No.
Now, did God come to Jesus and say, bro, look at you. You're all naked and clothed in death, and the sin of the world's on you? If we're going to bring you into the house, you got to get cleaned up, son. No, God didn't come and say that to Jesus. God didn't come and uncover Jesus' nakedness. God came and clothed upon Jesus.
Right.
See, God is the clother, not the uncoverer. And we've explained justification and everything else as if God was the uncoverer.
Right.
As if God was the one who come and pointed at our inability. As if he come and pointed at our shame. He come and pointed at the sin in our life. He come and pointed at the fruit of death in our life. That's not God.
No.
Right?
No.
And we missed it about Abraham for so long. But, you know, God called Abraham the father of many nations. It's just shocking for people. Before Abraham believed.
Yeah.
Abraham was Abram when God called him the father of many nations. Paul says it in Romans 4. He talks about when God took Abram into the mountain and showed him the stars and said, so shall thy seed be. That was God telling Abram he was the father of many nations. And he didn't look like he was the father of many nations, did he? What was standing against Abraham being the father of many nations? He had no seed.
Right.
The deadness of his flesh.
Right.
The deadness in Sarah's womb. What was standing against Abraham? Death. What was keeping Abraham from appearing as the father of many nations? The deadness of his body. Right? And so God proved Abraham was the father of many nations. On the mountain, Abraham says, even should Isaac die, God possesses the ability to raise someone from the dead. And so what Abraham was basically saying there was, not by strength of my hand, O God, will I be the father of many nations, but by you and your strength. That's the faith. Right? And so Abraham, is a perfect example of mankind and what was standing against mankind. Listen, if we don't know what ails us, we ain't going to know what the solution is,
right,
or how we're going to be healed.
Sure.
And most of the church is sitting around, not our church, but like in the world, most of them are sitting around and got no idea what brings forth the fruit of the flesh in their lives. They got no idea what subverts the soul. They got no idea what the problem is. So they have no idea what their eyes need to be set on for them to be healed.
Right.
I think back now when God showed me this verse, and I must have read this verse a million times, but Paul says in Romans, the strength of sin is death. Or the sting of death is sin.
Mm-hmm.
The sting of death is sin.
Right.
So, there's a sting that comes to the human heart from sin. Death is the father of everything that ails our lives. It's the father of fear. It's the father of lack. It's the father of laboring and toiling. If you can be persuaded that you have all things that pertain to life and godliness,
Yes.
you'll never be deceived by laboring and toiling.
Right.
Because the concept of working for life when you already have life makes no sense.
That's right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so you can't be deceived by the works message if your heart is stung with life. But if your heart is stung with death, the end result of that will be a life filled with the works of the flesh. Because your heart will be filled with fear. Your heart will be filled with lack. You'll think, I don't have what is needed for life. I don't have what is needed for God-likeness. I'm not a son. I'm not a daughter. I don't look like God. I'm an orphan in the earth. Now, next thing you know, you're laboring and toiling, trying to clothe yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And so, every evil thing, if we want to call it that way, but I would say it this way, everything that torments us in our life, everything, the root or the father of it is death.
Yeah.
Everything. Everything that torments us in our life, the root or the father is death.
I was just going to say,